Hey everyone, it's Dylan from Chess Lifestyle. Today I'm going to be showing you something a little bit new. It's called E&E training. It's a new show series concept that I want to try to implement here on the channel. And E&E stands for Evaluation and Execution. And I came up with this as a training method to help Michael over lockdown during our sessions, try to get over some of his time pressure issues. And it was originally devised so that he would evaluate the position quickly and to try to get him to incorporate this into his, to make it habitual and intuitive as a process, a systematic process, a way of thinking over the board. And so you have to evaluate the position, especially at critical moments in a game, before coming up with ideas and plans. And yeah, I think it's important to know who's better, if anyone, before coming up with an idea so that you kind of know what your goal is. So correctly evaluating the position is just as important as seeing concrete tactics, I think, because if you can calculate a tactic, but you arrive at a position that is just not better or possibly worse for you, then there's no point in calculating things properly. So these are sort of the twin skills you need to master in chess, evaluation and calculation, I think. But this is evaluation and execution, so it combines both. And one important thing about this training method is that I don't give any themes. And I think this is important to try to do as much as possible when you're working on exercises. For example, I'm working through Yusupov's book, and that entire series book, it's a 9-volume series of books. I'm on the first one still, but yeah, it's divided very systematically into different chapters with different themes, and you work on a bunch of problems, like 12 exercises per theme, like consecutively until you move on to the next theme. And that is one way of learning. It can be effective for some applications, but I think it's really good for you to think for yourself as quickly as possible as if you're playing in a game. And getting yourself into that mindset of playing a game, I think, is one of the most underestimated ways to train. And yeah, so that's what I'm going to help offer here. I'm going to give you two problems. Problems is not really the right word. Two exercises where I want you to start with evaluating the position and then try to come up with a plan and think concretely. And Michael's actually in Serbia right now, playing at the Serbia Open, which is pretty exciting. He's having a pretty good event. Maybe when this video drops, I don't know, the tournament might be over by then, but he can have some light study in between rounds or something. He's going to be abroad anyway. I'm sure he'll check this out. Anyway, hope you enjoy and not get traumatic flashbacks from earlier E&E problems that I've shown you. But yeah, these are going to be a little bit different than the ones he's used to. I give him some quite intense calculation-heavy ones, but where a prior evaluation is important. They involve calculation, but there is a theme to these. I'm not going to tell you the theme because, as I already said, that's not the point. I'll tell you the theme later, and it involves an important takeaway that I want you to learn at the end of this video. So, okay, and before I get you started, I'm going to tell you a quick story about why I think themes can be detrimental to the learning process. I've been working with a Indian international master as my coach. Great guy, great coach, been loving it so far. He started giving me sets of 10 problems, just positions to work on throughout the week. And then we would go over them during our sessions. And at the start, he gave me positions with a theme so that I knew sort of what to look for. And immediately my brain just jumps to, I mean, obviously, there's a theme, so I'm looking for ideas and candidate moves that fit within this theme, which alters my thought process. It forces me to play or to consider moves that I wouldn't normally consider or play, and this isn't transferable to an over-the-board practice. This isn't really an effective way to learn, I don't think, or not as effective. And so what would happen is a lot of times I would solve the problems more easily because I knew the theme, and that's not really helpful because nobody's going to sit there and tap you on the shoulder when you're playing a game and tell you what kinds of moves to look for that would fit under a certain theme. But also what I would do on the opposite end of the spectrum from that is I would overcompensate basically. If the theme was dynamic play, I would look for super dynamic moves, and sometimes I went overboard, and my calculation isn't the best. It's one of my weaknesses, and so sometimes I would just assume it was a dynamic move, and I would calculate it, and I would have this confirmation bias towards dynamic moves, and it would fail me. And sometimes he would throw in like trick problems to try to trick me. And so anyway, the point is, think for yourself, simulate a game situation as best you can, and this will have a lot of benefits when it comes time to actually compete. Of course, if you're not taking competition seriously, then you can learn in a number of ways, but I think this is a really good way to prepare for an actual over-the-board competition. So, okay, without any further ado, let's get right into this, this first exercise. So yeah, evaluate the position and come up with a plan accordingly. But yeah, go ahead and pause the video and see what you can come up with. Oh my. Okay, so if you came up with the move bishop takes h7, sort of Greek gift idea, you're in, well, not so good company because I got this answer wrong, and this is what I played. Bishop takes h7 actually doesn't lead to anything good for white after this series of checks. Yeah, I mean, we check on d3, and he has to block with the knight. We pile up the pressure, and h3 was my move to try to just win some material back and try to open up lines against the king. But I sort of just missed here that in my calculation that bishop takes g5 is a move. And after bishop takes g5, he's just up 2 pieces. And even if we win a piece back, it's not enough. And after we give a check, he's just going to run away. So this isn't working for white. And just believe me that none of the sidelines do either. Bishop takes h7 is sort of a decoy that my coach says everyone falls for. And alas, I did as well, but it's not the correct idea. It's actually a much simpler move. And to my horror, when he showed me this move, I realized that I hadn't even considered it in my candidate moves. And that's something I want to talk about a little bit more. But first I'll show you the move. Rook e5. It's a simple fork. Yeah, that's right. You're just forking this guy and this guy. Well, let's make it red. Yeah, white's not winning here, but this is a much superior try. And if black's not very careful, he's just going to get mated, or he's going to lose material very quickly. And this has to do with the following continuation. Bishop takes f3 is forced because he's just going to drop a pawn on d5 if he doesn't. And now, again, the pawn is hit, and there's no real good retreat square for this knight in order to defend the pawn by the queen. So he has to push c6. If you got this far, you might think that now might be the right time to go bishop takes h7 check. But again, this doesn't work because after the king takes, you give a check, you pile up on the h-file. Black has this move f6, which makes the luft for the king. We can give a check on e6, but after just simply dropping back the knight, there's no clear way forward for white anymore, and black. And white doesn't have compensation for the sacrificed bishop. So again, bishop takes h7 is hasty, and we have to be concrete about things. We could consider the move rook a e1, just attacking the bishop, but after bishop f6, sidestepping, we have to go rook 5 to e2. If we try to move the rook over here, g6 now works because in this line with queen h3, we don't have the luxury of letting the rook hang anymore, because now this isn't as big of a deal while the knight is on d6 ready to jump in and block the diagonal. So That's not working. And so while other moves may not give up the advantage, like c3, for example, queen g3 is just basically winning. Lovely move, queen g3, which I didn't consider. Well, I mean, I didn't consider rook e5, but I wouldn't have seen this for sure, even if I had seen rook e5. Because it's a little counterintuitive, because the queen aims at this g7 pawn, which, as an entry point into black's position, as a focal square, is not super clear. I mean, it has some, like bishop h6 ideas, but that's not really the plan. That's not the point. The idea is that we're actually piling up pressure on this diagonal against the knight. And again, the knight has no good squares, and it's really hard to further defend the knight. And furthermore, we're threatening this kind of business and picking up the knight, giving a rook for 2 pieces. And on knight e8, we simply play rook a e1, attacking the bishop. And after the bishop moves, we just improve our rook. We attack this spot here, and after g6, now because of this, this motif with the bishop blocking the f-pawn, we can actually leave that rook hanging and just pile up more pressure against the h7 pawn. And there are devastating mate threats, and the rook can't be taken, because if it is, then after we take here, again, like I said, there's no f5 push. And so this is a motif to remember. And mate is incoming. So knight e8 doesn't work. And if that doesn't work, let's say he just defends the bishop. Well, that doesn't really do anything for him, because again, we give up the rook for 2 pieces. Okay, and finally, the last move that might make sense is bishop f6, just moving the bishop with the tempo against the rook. But now we have bishop takes h7 check, after which, when the king recaptures, we have rook h5 check with a discovery against d6, and white is winning. So yeah, this queen g3 idea was really nice, and that's the reason that in this position, white is just winning. So yeah, this rook e5 idea, very simple, very straightforward. We're simply just adding another piece into the attack. We're attacking the bishop, we're attacking the pawn, and I mean, it's pretty obvious once you know the answer. Obviously, the bishop is forced to capture on f3, after which, I mean, even if we didn't have immediate concrete, plans or ideas with this queen g3 stuff, I mean, it's just a better position for white, and there's no reason to go for this. Well, I mean, the reason you don't go for bishop takes h7 is that it concretely doesn't work, but yeah, I'm ashamed that this wasn't in my candidate moves. Rook takes e5. And so I want to talk for a second about forming candidate moves. This is actually something that separates super strong players from just your average club player, I think, is because they get attached. You hear this a lot with, like Agard, for example, says this. You have to consider candidate moves early. Like from the start of your calculations, I think it's the best time to come up with candidate moves. You can get really lost in a line leading to, like bishop takes h7, leading to a lot of subvariations and a tree where sometimes you'll just waste 5 or 10 minutes just on this one candidate move when you haven't even considered anything else. So I think if you establish candidate moves, unless something is just overwhelmingly and obviously winning, you should come up with a range of candidate moves and then decide systematically how to look at them. This is starting to sound a lot like Vukovic, Art of the Attack. Is it Vukovic who recommends this like ultra systematic way of calculating the tree of variations? That's not really what I'm suggesting. I'm just trying to encourage you to come up with candidate moves earlier than normal, so that at least you know that you have other options to fall back on, and you don't spend too much time in some sort of rabbit hole. So yeah, that's the takeaway from this one. And notice how, like, if you had a theme, like say I would say the theme was fork, you would instantly see this move, and then you wouldn't have learned anything. Like now, and at least this way, you're learning to come up with candidate moves early. So yeah, I think learning this way, it can be kind of humbling because it exposes some of our just embarrassing short-sightedness when it comes to these positions. And I think when I analyze the position a little bit, this exact position. I think one of the reasons that at least I didn't consider this move, and I think this would be true for a lot of players, is that you don't often see a position that resembles this where the d pawn is loose and white has a really nice rook on e1 that is already lined up ready to join the attack. Like, this is a great position for white that you're not really used to having achieved. So it's not really something that would be ingrained in your like pattern recognition. So it is something you have to like sort of formulate. You have to have a reason to look for this, I think. And if you're really diligent about searching for candidate moves early on, then you shouldn't miss these things, and your quality of moves should greatly improve. Okay, so like I said, I didn't get this one right. If you did find rook e5 and this was your move, bravo. I think it's actually harder than it looks to settle on a move like this, especially when I give you this exercise to actually land on this as your strongest move. So yeah, I think you're doing really well if you came up with rook e5, and if not, use what I've said so far and see if you can apply it to solving the next problem. So let's move on to the next exercise. All right, guys, here's the second exercise I'm going to show you. I'm not going to give you a theme, but I am going to give you a short, well, I'm going to ask you a question about the position. And that is, would you trade queens? Black offered a queen exchange on e7 here. Evaluate the position, decide whether you want to trade queens, and yeah, like before, just evaluate the position, try to come up with a plan, and I would say try to do it within 5 to 10 minutes, I would say. So go ahead and pause your video. Okay, so when I first saw this position, when I was working on my homework a few weeks ago, I pretty quickly decided that I didn't want to exchange queens because we're down a pawn and black is undeveloped. And I thought the best way to exploit this is to build pressure, and doing that is easier to do with major pieces on the board. So, and that is true sometimes, but if you thought like me, you will be surprised again to know that in this position, my evaluation was absolutely correct, that black is underdeveloped, and this is important to realize. But it's also important to realize concretely that the only way to take advantage, it's very shocking, but the only way to take advantage of black being undeveloped here is to exchange the queens. And so the big takeaway from this problem is going to be to evaluate the position and then to combine it with the correct execution. And this means not skipping over forcing continuations. You have to look at all the checks and captures, including queen takes e7, and what that can lead to. Well, first let's look at my line. My line was queen f4, and this is where I wanted to put the queen to maintain the tension along the f-file, and just ask black what he's going to do. If he's going to castle, my idea was to push e5 and try to get my knight in this way. My line was bishop b7, and after bishop c2 with the intention of bishop e4, trading off black's best piece and only develops minor piece. I calculated knight e7 and bishop e4, but now I missed that black has this queen c5 check, after which we move and he can just pick up the pawn. But in this position, he can probably just throw in the check first, and I don't really have much in this position, unfortunately. So my line is incorrect. Queen f4 just gives black a crucial tempo to get castled and start developing. So one of my big issues in this exercise was just assuming dogmatically that maintaining the queens on was the only way to punish black's lack of development. That's not always the case. You have to concretely analyze that this is the case. After you can't just rely on these positional dogmas, these rules of thumb. They're good starting points, but you have to combine them with concrete analysis. So queen takes e7, actually the only concrete way to punish black's lack of development, and we will see why. After king e7, we're going knight e5 check, and this is the move you would have missed. This is the move I missed. If you found this move and you found this continuation, well done again. And this was sort of an epiphany to me that I really needed to de-emphasize these dogmas and and reintroduce a more systematic, diligent way of combining. So after knight d5 check, remember, always look at your checks and captures. If he takes, then we have bishop takes d5 with tempo, and he can't do this because of this, and he loses the rook. So he has to block with the knight, after which we take the pawn anyway, and we go rook c7, and we pile up pressure on the pin. And this knight is just a goner after something like this, and we're left a pawn up rather than being a pawn down from the starting position, and we have an active rook. So this is not enough compensation for black. White should be winning this. This is the main line of the puzzle. Black has a couple alternatives, starting with king d6. Well, let's start with king d7. Obviously you can't because of this fork. After king d6, you may think that white can just pick up this pawn on f7, but it's not so simple. After the rook, yes, the rook has nowhere to go, but black has this nice saving resource, bishop e6, and black is actually going to be up material. So after king d6, we have to go e5. We give another check, and we deflect the king away from the 7th rank. So we bring in our knight, we add more pressure, and black has no good way to save this pawn, and all our pieces are going to be flooding in. So, like for example, f6, then we just fork the rook in the corner. So he has to do something, like let's say he just develops a piece. We take. He has to move the rook out of the way because we are threatening this fork. So he moves the rook, and we give a check, and he's dropping everything. So you can see white's not even down material here. Material's equal, but black is just getting crushed with these pieces on the back rank. So black can try knight d7, after which we still take on f7, and these pawns are going to drop. This pawn's probably going to drop, and yeah, this king is out in no man's land and shouldn't survive this. So again, this exercise would have been much easier with a theme. For example, if I would have told you why to play, make sure to look at all of your checks and captures, then you probably wouldn't have missed this knight d5 check idea after the exchange of queens. So really the big takeaway from this ENE session today with both of these exercises is that you should come up with your candidate move list early on, which one will have the benefit of saving you time calculating various rabbit holes that you might not need to spend too much time on. And two, it will allow you to see these sort of forcing combinations that you missed for various dogmatic reasons like I did, or because you just didn't consider your checks and captures. And again, I really want to stress that there's no shame in getting these wrong. I didn't get them right, and I imagine stronger players than me would fail as well for similar reasons. I just think it's really illuminating and worthwhile to evaluate yourself on these types of themeless exercises when you're left to your own devices. It's really illuminating to see sort of, it was illuminating for me to see where I stand when left to my own devices. And I think targeting my weaknesses in this way, where I can find out why I didn't consider these candidate moves, is really beneficial. And I think I learned a lot just from these two exercises. So I wanted to share them with you. Hope you enjoyed. If you liked these ENE exercises or this concept of ENE in general, let me know. I would like to have your feedback. If you want to see more of these, then that would be good for me to know as well. I am planning on making this a series if there's enough interest. So yeah, it would be good to get your feedback. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.